uh, put in the roles and see what are there in the modules. Okay. So first of all, you've asked me a question yesterday. I'll address this first. The options that you see over here, these cannot be configured. Okay. The how it works is, suppose if you click on the ITIL, so whatever applications are having the ITIL roles will come up, but this cannot be configured. As of now, I did not find an option to configure this. I feel there should be an option. I will research more about it, and if I find something, I will let you know. Okay.
Okay.
And you were talking about
Actually,
the. Mhm.
actually, I found an option, but I'm not sure whether
Okay, from where did you find out? Let me know. I will see.
um, I found it in UI properties, system properties, and then you have to go to UI.
Go to
Yeah,
Europe. Okay.
yeah. Not here. Or else just type menu. 1 second. I'll just.
Menu.
Yeah, menu list or something like that. Yeah, yeah. This is the one. Yes.
Okay. Okay, you can put it over here. Oh, great.
Hello, Pratul. Can you hear me? Oh.
Hello.
Yeah. Hello, Pratul.
Sorry, there was internet disruption on my side. These
Okay.
things
Okay.
happen. Okay. So what I was telling is, for this SSO video, there must be SSO circle configuration service now. There, right? There is a video by a person named as John Anderson. This one. I was not able to send it across to Srinivas
Hello,
also.
and welcome to Servicenow.com.
So if you
Okay.
see the entire video, it will give you a very good picture. See if I show you some parts. Basically, we have to.
To go into
No, I'll
SSO
just mute
Circle
this.
itself. So go to SSOcircle.com.
Okay. So what it does is it shows us like we have to populate some properties through the metadata, right? So
Yeah.
it was showing us even how to. One second, where's the metadata part? It is showing this is the metadata of some of the system of the SSO circle. So it gives us clarity like how do you pick up those URLs from the metadata, and if you put it in the properties, then what is the significance of that? Okay, just go through
Okay.
this video, the search in YouTube SSO circle video by John Anderson. You'll get this video. Okay,
Yeah. Okay.
you put it aside. Okay, now do you have any doubts in from the yesterday's session? Application modules, tables, columns,
No, I don't have any doubts. Yeah.
SysID, reference fields, everything is clear, right?
Yes.
Okay. So now what I will do is I will jump on to. See, I keep on repeating. I might be missing few parts, few things, few small things, but I will cover it as when it comes. Okay,
Okay.
because you cannot put down everything, and that's the problem. Huh. So now we will go on to UI policies, UI action. Okay, and scripting. So basically, these are the things that we use in ServiceNow to control the entire system. To control the entire system, as in whatever we want to do in the system, we can do it via these things. So basically, there are two type of scripting. First is a client script, and second is a server-side script. Do you have any knowledge or do you know the difference between a client and a server-side scripting?
Yes, I do have an idea. Yes.
Hello,
Yeah. Yes, Pratul, I have an idea.
hello.
Hello, Pratul, can you hear me? Hello.
I think it's back. I think there's some problem today.
Okay.
No problem. These things will happen. More specifically when I'm in India, where it's bound to happen. All these things. The
Okay.
connectivity is strong over here, right? So what I was saying is, there are basically two types of scripting. One is a client-side script, and the other one is a server-side script. Do you know the
Okay.
difference between the client-side script and the server-side script?
I have an idea about the client and server scripts, but not
Uh,
completely.
okay, see, we need to first understand like what is the basic difference between a client-side coding and a server-side coding. What I mean to say, we need to understand how and when it is working. Like suppose to give you an example, suppose if I go onto the incident form, let's take example from ServiceNow itself. Excuse me. Now, there is nothing is mandatory over here. Let's do one thing. Let's make something mandatory. Let's. What happened? Okay, right click. You're there, right, Shrikant?
Yeah, I'm there, Pratul.
It was showing me a pop-up. Your connection has been lost. That is why. Okay, what I'll
Okay.
do is I'll make it mandatory and I'll update it. Now we see that this order is mandatory. Now what I'll do is I'll try to submit my form. If I submit my form, it says the following mandatory fields are not filled. Order. Okay. So now what is happening is we are on a web browser, right?
Hmm.
And what we are doing is these mandatory validations are done on the browser level itself. Like
Okay.
client means to say the browser. This is a thin client, right? The
Yeah.
browser is doing this validation. So client-side validation means the validations that the browser itself is doing. Like suppose if I tell that this validation, suppose if I say that the order should be mandatory, right?
Hmm.
That's what I'm doing. Now if I say that this validation is done on the server, so what will happen in that case is I will not fill in the order and I'll be able to submit the form. And the data will go onto the server. Then it will get validated on the server and the server will tell me, boss, you have not filled in order, and there will be error message that will be coming back. So that will be a unnecessary transaction because
Okay.
on the client itself we know that the order is mandatory. So let's put some rules on the client itself so that we cannot even go to the server until unless we put the values for order. That is
Okay.
the meaning of a client side validation. That you are
Hmm.
doing, your server itself is doing the validation. Not your server, sorry. Your client itself is doing the validation. That is, your web browser is doing those validations.
Okay.
Contrary to that, server-side validation is something that is getting validated on the server. Like suppose if some website is asking for our bank details, okay. So we put in our bank details, but the client or our browser will not know whether we are putting the right details or not. So in that
Hmm.
case, what will happen? The details will go to the server. It will get validated over here. If it is validated, it will go through. If not, it will get an error message that your details are not correct. So those
Okay.
validations are happening on the server. So this is the major difference between a server-side validation and a client-side validation. The client-side validation happens on our system, on our browser, on our end itself. But the
Hmm.
server-side validation is happening on the server. This is very important to understand because then only we'll get to know, like down the line we'll have to analyze, like suppose this is the requirement, then how do I need to proceed on this? Do I have to write a
Hmm.
client-side script, or do I have to write a server-side script? I have to write a business, do I have to write a UI policy? So we need to understand that.
Okay. Prathul, can you give another example of server side script?
We will take a number of examples of server-side scripts.
Okay.
Okay. I was just giving you the difference between a client script and a client-side scripting and server-side scripting. Like
Okay.
how those two are different basically. How those two work. Or else if you want a better example of a server-side code, let's take up an example. I don't have something at the back of my head.
Okay.
What I will do is we'll start off with UI policy. Okay. First of all, the first level of validation on the first I'll take up client-side validation. Okay. The
Hmm.
first level of validation that happens on the client side that we have already seen, like the first level of configuration, as you can right click over here, you can go into configure dictionary, and
Hmm.
you can choose these three options. You can make it read only, you can make it mandatory, you can make it display, means if either it will be displayed or it will be hidden. So these are the
Okay.
first three validations that we can do on the dictionary. Now, if we are doing anything on the dictionary, suppose if I check this mandatory on the dictionary, this field will always be mandatory. This field will always be mandatory, irrespective
Okay.
of whatever I am doing. Right?
Okay.
Like it is not conditional mandatory. Like you are not putting any condition to make it mandatory. What you are telling us that this field urgency will always be mandatory.
Hmm. Okay.
And there is one more important thing that we have to note down over here. If you see this, what I did is I went into incident. I opened an existing incident. Then I went on to this field called urgency. I right clicked and went on to configure dictionary. But now if you see this form shows that the table is task, but
Okay.
we went to this field from the incident table. Now this is because incident table is inherited from the task table, and
Okay.
field urgency is basically coming from the task table and it is getting used in the incident table. So this
Hmm.
field is not basically a field of the incident table, but this field is basically a field of the task table. So if you make this field mandatory, this will become mandatory on the task level. And
Okay.
wherever this field is used, because incident is inheriting the task table, there are many other tables which might be inheriting the task table, and they might be using this urgency field. So it will become mandatory in all those forms.
Okay.
That is why when we are doing something on the dictionary level, we should make sure that it will not impact other things. Because let's see, let's see if there's an urgency field on the change form. Urgency is not there. What we'll do is we'll put on urgency.
Yeah.
We'll
Yeah.
put urgency over here, put it on the top so that we'll know where it is. Okay, now urgency is here. It is not mandatory, but what I will do is I'll make it mandatory and I will save this page.
Okay.
What I'm doing is I'm making urgency mandatory on the task level. But if you go here and if you reload this page, see, this urgency has become mandatory over here as well.
Yeah.
You know the meaning of these the symbols and the colors.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm
See,
aware.
basically red means a mandatory field.
Mandatory. Yes.
The star is coming only for mandatory fields. Okay, so when we make something mandatory on the dictionary level, it will impact other things as well. So you should refrain from making these things, changing these things on the dictionary level. Okay,
Okay.
now let's go on to UI policies.
So UI policies comes under client scripts, right?
Yeah, this is client-side validation.
Okay.
UI policy is also client-side validation. See, uh, UI policy and client script are client-side validation. Data policy is a server-side validation, but data policy also works differently. We'll talk about data policy. Business rule is a typical server-side code.
Okay.
Okay. Client script and UI policies are typical client-side code. Data policy is also a server-side code, but it works differently. I will tell you
Okay.
about data policy. And business rule is a typical server-side code. In UI action, you can write both server-side and client-side code that we will talk about. That is a bit advanced, but we will talk about that. And in schedule job also you have to write client-side, you have to write server-side code as well. We'll
Okay.
talk about all these things. Let's take it up on one by one basis.
Okay.
Now the first thing is we'll have to understand why do we write a UI policy. Okay, so the main purpose of UI, there are three main purposes of a UI policy. You can make something read only, you can make something mandatory, or you can control the visibility of a field. These are the three main things that we do via UI policy. You can do other things also, but this is the main motto of a UI policy. So let's do one thing. Let's open one of the incident form. Let's open one of the incident form. Now what we will do is we will just write a plain UI policy first, then I will write condition based UI policy. Let's close this tab, it's not required. Okay, now what I'll do is I click on new. Let's see what is there in UI policy. Okay, now the first thing on a UI policy is table. So we'll have to specify on which table do we want to write this UI policy. So as of now we are doing it on the incident table. See, now the difference comes when you are writing a UI policy only on the incident table. So if you are making something mandatory, suppose if you are making the urgency field which is on the task level mandatory via UI policy, but this UI policy is running only on the incident table. It is not running on other tables, so it will not impact the other tables. Okay, so this is the table name. Application scope is global, active is true. Short description, let's put any short description. Make a field read only. Let's put any description, any short description of this. See, there is another field called order. Order is basically, suppose if you have two UI policies on the same field. Okay, so the one with the higher order will take precedence. As in everything will get executed, but it will get executed in order. Okay, suppose if you have written two UI policies, so the one with the lower order will get executed first and one with the higher order will get executed afterwards.
Okay.
There is not much significance of order in UI policy. Order is basically significant in business rule that I will tell you when we will cover business rule. Order is there, you can use this order, but that is not very much significant. Might be used sometimes, but I have not come across a scenario where we use order in UI policy because it's not required. Okay. So we keep the order as it is. Now it says there is a tab called when to apply. It says when do you want this UI policies to run. So what we'll do is, as of now, I will not give any condition over here. Okay. Now there's a global checkbox. If you want to check this, okay. I will tell you about this global checkbox when we see client script. Okay. Apply the UI policy action. Okay. So when it says that do you want to apply this for the UI policy, when the form is loading as well. Okay, normally if you uncheck this, it will not be applicable when the form is loading for the first time. But if you check this, when we'll see how it works, you will understand and you'll be able to map what is happening. So when you check it, it says that it will work even when the form is loading. Now there is an option called reverse is false. Let me tell you what reverse is false is there. And table that extends the specific table inherits this UI policy. See, there is an important checkbox called inherit. Okay, so what I told you initially when we were talking about inheritance and we were talking about extending tables and all, I told the structure and the rules that are written for the parent table are applicable for the child table as well. Okay,
Yes.
so we have options. See, if you read this, it says table that extend the specified table inherits this UI policy. That means suppose if I've written any UI policy on the task table, and when in that UI policy I have checked this inherit checkbox, so those UI policies will be applicable to the incident table as well. Now
Okay.
suppose when I'm writing this UI policy and I check this inherit, so if further on, if I extend, though I cannot extend any table from the incident table that we saw, that incident table is not extendable, but still if we are extending anything from the incident table, then this UI policy will be applicable on that extended table as well. Okay,
Okay. Yeah.
this is
Okay.
very important to understand. What I will do is now I'll just save this one. Excuse me, I'm going through a cold.
Okay.
Okay, now these things are done. Now we'll see after saving there is something new has come in, because till now we say that we have defined what is the table, like what is for description. It gives us an option when to apply. It did not ask me what it has to do, right? So after saving this, there is another related list that pops in. Now suppose if this is called as UI policy action. What action do you want to take on this? Now UI policy name is auto-populated, table is auto-populated. Now it wants to say that which field do you want to change or which field do you want to take action on. Let's select the same field that we did, or else you can take any field. Let's take this field out and see. Okay, so we selected this field. Now I will say you make it read only. Read only is true. Okay, now what I'll do is
Okay.
I'll do this. Okay, let's go back. We say that we have made urgency is, see, we can do three things: mandatory, visible, and read only. We have mandatory and visible leave alone, that we are not doing anything, like we are not making it mandatory or non-mandatory, and we are not hiding it. But we are telling that it should be read only. Now what I will do is I will go into my. I see that urgency is not read only, right? We can edit urgency.
Yeah.
Now what I will do is I will reload my form. Oh, it does not become read only. Urgency read only is true. One second. I think it is conflicting somewhere. Let's try to change this field name. I cannot change it from here. Let's go back to this. There are multiple UI policies with the same order for this field. This order is not predictable. I think there is something else which is written on the UI on the urgency field. So that will impact because of the order. Suppose if I write two UI policies on the same field with the same
Okay.
order. So suppose I'm in one UI policy I'm telling you make this mandatory, and in the other one I'm telling you remove the mandatory. So that will conflict, right? So there might be
Yeah.
something which is conflicting. Let's put in short description and update it. No, this is not working. What's the problem? Let me see one second. Incident global. Short description read only. Sometimes we face these issues. The simplest of things does not work out. No, now it has become mandatory. Okay, read only. I think I cannot make it read only. Okay. See, now I made short description mandatory. So it is, see, there are few things that we'll have to keep in mind, few things very logical. Like suppose if I try to make one field mandatory and read only both, this is also come with experience. But if I try to make a field mandatory and read only both, what I'm saying is this field is suppose and that field is not having any value. So what I'm telling that this field is read only means you cannot edit that field and it is mandatory. So the system will say was this is not logically correct, right? You cannot say that something is read only, that you cannot put in values and you say it is mandatory. So if those things can conflict sometimes, but it will work normally. So what we have made short description mandatory. Now we did not put any condition into it, right?
Yeah.
Now suppose we want to put some condition on top of it. Few things are there which we have missing because of the condition. Suppose if I say that do it only if the caller is system administrator. I say that you have to do it only when the caller is system administrator. Save this. Let's come back over here and just reload it. So in this case, when the caller is system administrator, the short description is mandatory. Now let's do it. Let's change this color. See, when I remove the caller, the short description is now not mandatory. Right?
Okay.
Mandatory has gone. Suppose if I put in any other user, able tutor, it is not mandatory. Now when I go back and I put system administrator again, it says that yes boss, it is mandatory now. So this is how it is working. Now in this case, this checkbox was useful for us. It says reverse if false. That means it says boss, whenever the caller is system administrator, you do whatever is told over here in the UI policy action. And if the caller is not system administrator, you do the reverse of what is told over here. So it says that when the caller is system administrator, you make short description mandatory, and when the caller is not system administrator, you make short description non-mandatory. That is the use of reverse if false tag. That is how we see normally when we use something. It will be like suppose you do this if this is true. Don't do this if this is not true, right? So that is how it should be. So that is the use of reverse if false. It is very handy over here. It is very handy. And see, we saw that these are the three options. And Servicenow strongly recommends if you have to make something mandatory, read only, or if you have to hide something, you use UI policy. You can do the same things through client script, but Servicenow recommends to use UI policy. There are two benefits of UI policy. First of all, UI policy has this order field. That means you can yourself put in like which UI policy you want to run first. Suppose you have a business requirement that you have two UI policies on the same field, and something should take precedence. Sometimes those requirements come. I don't have any. I cannot think of any requirement. I will think of some requirement and tell you. So sometimes some requirements come in that you need to write multiple UI policies and you need to order them. Like suppose this should run first, this should run second, this should run at the last. Okay. So in that case, this order can be handy. And moreover, it's that everything is system defined. Like you don't have to write any script over here. You have to do just configurations on the system. Like it says that whenever we are writing script, that there are chances that we might make some mistakes, right? But in this case, in UI policy, you have everything as configurations. So nothing is there that you have to code. So everything is on the UI. So you just have to configure and it's done. So Servicenow recommends to use UI policy whenever you want to make something mandatory, visible, or read only. Okay. Now, one more part in UI policy. There's one more tab called script. If you click this run script, you will have two dialog boxes. See, you will have two boxes that appear. One is telling execute if true, and the other is telling execute if false. Like in UI policy also you can write script. Okay,
Okay.
and do anything what you want on the client side.
Hmm.
It's not that you cannot write script in UI policy. So if you click on run script, it will give you that execute this part of the script whenever your condition is met, whatever condition you have given, and execute this part of the script, execute if false, whenever the condition what you have given is not met. Okay.
Okay.
So if required, we can use scripts also in UI policy. That will depend upon our requirement or how our way of coding. Some people will be comfortable with client script, some people are comfortable with UI policy. Okay. Now there is one more small thing that I want to highlight. See, suppose if I uncheck this on load, okay, and what I'll do is I'll save this. I'll go here and I'll reload my form. See, this is not mandatory now. Short description is not mandatory now, as the form is just loaded. Now let me do one thing. Let me clear off this field. I've cleared off this field and I'll put system and see. Now when I put system administrator, this will become mandatory. So it was not working when the form was loading.
Okay.
So that is the only significance of this on-load checkbox. These small things comes very handy because we have small requirements, and what will happen is normally what happens is we have n number of validations. Or suppose if I take a state field, suppose if I take the assign to field, there might be option that assign to is mandatory, sometimes assign to is not mandatory. It depends on various conditions. Like it
Okay.
should not be mandatory on a new form. Suppose if I click on create new, it should not be mandatory. It should be mandatory on an existing form. So on load and all these things comes handy over there if
Hmm.
we have
Okay.
to make those validations. Let's do one thing. Let's mark it as. Do you have any doubts in this UI policy?
No, Pratil, I'm good.
Anything you did not understand out of this? This is very simple though.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I will do is I'll make it an active that does not hinder with our system, and I will just save it. Now I will give you some brief about data policy, but we will cover data policy at the end. Okay, because
Okay.
normally we don't write data policy, but you should know what is a data policy. See, data policy. Okay, let's do one thing. Let's cover client script. I'll take up data policy after that. Let's go on to system definition client scripts. Okay. Now client script is also a client side coding. Client script also comes under client side scripting. Now let's go on to new in client script. Okay. Now basically in client script, let's talk about the important fields first. Name is just a description. We can put any name over here. Table is again the table to which it is applicable,
Hmm.
similar to our UI policy. Now UI type. There is a UI type desktop, mobile, or both, because in Servicenow you have the mobile view as well now.
Yes. Yeah.
Similarly, you have active checkbox, you have inherited, you have global. Global I will talk about later. I'll talk about global at the end. Inherited is the same thing that we were talking about. Okay. Now the important thing to discuss in client script is this type. Basically, there are four types of client script: on sell edit, on change, on load, and on submit. We will see examples of on change, on load, and on submit. On sell edit we don't use very frequently, but I will tell you what an on sell edit is. Okay, so let's understand what is all these things. On load is basically, it is self-explanatory. It will work whenever the form is loading. Whenever the form is loading, then at that time this on change client script will execute.
Okay.
Sorry, on load will execute.
Hmm.
So if you put on load, there is nothing else which is coming in. Only the script you have to write it over here. Okay, we'll see examples of all those things. Now if I go on to on change, if I select on change, you see there's new field coming in. Okay, now because if you go by the language, on change means it will execute when something is changing. So
Okay.
you will say, boss, what is changing in the system? So it says that on change of a field, whenever the field is changing, whenever the value in that field is changing, this script will get executed. So in this drop down, you will get all the fields that are there on the table that you have selected. Suppose if
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
selected the incident table over here, so all the fields from the incident table will be here. Suppose let's say column. So this client script will get executed whenever the caller value is changing.
Hmm.
Whenever the
Okay.
caller value is changing, this client script will get executed. Okay. Now the third option is on submit. On submit, as it is self-explanatory again, it will be working whenever we are hitting on the submit button on the form. Whenever we are
Okay.
trying to submit the form, this will get executed. Okay. Now, what I will do is, in order to facilitate you with this client script, I will show you some example first, and then I will tell you how some basic how the APIs are used in client script. Let's write an onload client script, and we will make this. We had made that UI policy inactive, right? Let's see load short description key. I told you initially that whenever we want to do anything on the field, we take the backend name, not the label. So the
Yeah.
backend name is underscore
Short.
description.
Yes.
Underscore description. So what I will do is, like, see, the coding what I will write is initially it will be difficult for you. Going ahead, you will be able to map it. If we have to do any manipulation on the form, we use an API called g underscore form.
Mm-hmm.
Now what we have to do is there's a function we have to make it mandatory. So there's a function called set mandatory. And this function will have to first say which field we want to make mandatory. Short description. The syntax you will get to know from wiki. Short description. True.
Okay.
Now what I will do is I will show you also the wiki page. See, wiki is very
So,
easy to find now.
so